This is the Mental Mettle Podcast, and I am your host, Coach Matt Toman. I'm a former athlete, teacher, coach, and athletic director that switched careers after surviving cancer and a stroke in the fall of 2020. But I'm also a dad of a son and a daughter that were successful high school athletes that went on to college. Now I use that experience along with my ICF coaching certification when helping teams, coaches, and athletes from all over the country. Each week, I will pose a specific question that will help coaches of all types better understand mental toughness. In the Mental Mettle Podcast, coaches will learn to help their athletes overcome adversity without being the adversity they need to overcome. Mettle is a person's ability to face adversity in a spirited and resilient manner. It is a great skill to have for athletics and for life, but it is not something we are born with. If you want it, you have to forge your mettle. And if you listen to the Mental Mettle Podcast, you already know that, but not everybody else does yet. So help me out by ordering and wearing some sweet The Mental Mettle Podcast gear. We've got short sleeve tees, long sleeve tees, and some super comfortable hoodies. Order online today and you can have your gear in no time. But the best part is that every order helps support the show and helps me spread the message that mental toughness is a trait that can and should be built. So find the link in the show notes, order your gear, and start showing that you know how to forge your mettle. And welcome back to the Mental Mettle Podcast. Once again, I'm your host, Coach Matt Toman, and I'm here with my guest today, Coach Toby Vallas. He's the head football coach at Farmington High School in Farmington, Illinois, and Coach Vallas is also an administrator, director of student services there, and I think that's going to factor in on this as well. It's just looking at, and I'm going to let you tell me about that. But first off, Coach, welcome to the show.
Hey, I appreciate you having me. You've had a couple of my good buddies on here, in John Hughes and Jeff Henry, so excited to be a part of it.
You know, if I'm going to tell you this right now, if those are your buddies, you're in good company. Those guys, I worked with Coach Hughes for years, and I've gotten to know Coach Henry just a little bit. Really good guys that I've had on the. And somebody asked me once, what kind of people do you want on the show? And my answer was, and I talked it to somebody like Hughes. I said, I just want people who get it, right? And he was like, I get what you're saying. And so I'm hoping, Coach Hughes gave me your number, your information. I was like, yeah, that means you're a guy that gets it, at least according to Hughes. So talk to me a little bit. I want to hear a little bit about your background growing up, because I think you mentioned that's going to factor in a little bit, but I want to talk about your background in football, and then just run me a little bit on how you ended up at Farmington.
So I grew up in Knoxville, Illinois, which is, a half hour from where I'm at now, 45 minutes from where I'm at now. And ironically, I've spent most of my life there, but I grew up kind of a weird background of three brothers that two of them I'd never met until I was 19. And then one brother that I saw on once or twice a year that, was, everybody says, it's your brother, aren't you excited? One of those deals. And I think that I always struggled social emotionally myself, and I was adopted by some family members who gave me a good home, a good place to live. And I think because they were good people, that I think back then in the 90s, your teachers never realized that you're somebody that's struggling. They think of people with social emotional problems, especially then, it's got to be somebody from a low socioeconomic background, somebody who doesn't have the things they need. But I think it's always been a lot of people, and it's just kind of came to the forefront. But I think I have a good look inside because of how I grew up.
I think that if it, at least back then, as we're talking about, not all that long ago, but I think that you had to have some serious, what's the word I'm looking for? Your social emotional problems had to be very evident, right? They had to be like, there had to be a lot of consequences. There had to be a lot of things that people could notice. And a kid that might be having some social emotional problems that kept it in, but still got their work done and they were like, oh, well, they'll be fine. right?
Yeah. I had lots of friends. I had good grades. I was a good athlete. And I think you go unnoticed sometimes when all those things are going well for you, but, as I got older, and we all know this from the studies, you get into your 20s and those problems start to come to the front. And sure enough, they did for me. I know that my dad was killed in prison. My mom was in a mental institution. She still is in assisted care. So there were you wanted problems. I had them, just people didn't know it.
Yeah, it's and there's doing a lot of research now about how childhood trauma, and there's a whole thing getting how it connects to a whole lot of health issues later on in life. Like it's cancer, heart attacks, things like alcoholism, things like they're not to like say, hey, you need to check some things out here, coach. But you know what I'm saying? Like there's
Yeah.
a
Oh, for
there's
sure.
there's a strong connection between these social emotional problems and childhood trauma. And if it's not dealt with, I think that's the thing. If it's not dealt with, there's some very serious issues for children, and not a lot of them, they just don't get taken care of like they should.
Yeah, and I think the people always say, well, it's mental or it's physical. The mental and the physical are tied hand in hand.
Oh,
We test our kids for speed all the time, and I'll tell you, when their speed's off, it's because they broke up with their girlfriend. It's because there's some
yeah.
other problem going on. They failed a test and mom's mad. They're all tied together.
Yeah, it's something that I started learning when I went through my coaching certification about the idea embodiment and how, and we know it, right? We know it because we're like, oh, when I get nervous, my stomach gets in knots, or when I get stressed, I get tension in my. We know it, but for some reason we think it's all those just like little things, but it's all the time. It's constant. Like if you're not in a good headspace, you're probably not in a good physical space. They're
For sure.
connected.
And I think about kids today. I think about, people, we always say like kids are so soft now. I was soft. I mean, you want to criticize me? I was soft. Every adult I know that I've worked with, they don't like to be criticized, so I guess they're soft too,
Yeah.
But kids, they're
Right.
facing criticism on social media every day.
Yeah. I think that's funny that you say that, because I see a lot of teachers and I see a lot of coaches that talk about kids that are soft and say they just can't, like they get upset when I get on them and they do this and they just can't take it. And it's the same people that if their administrator were to go in and give them a bad, review or something like that, they would fold up. And I'm like, we're the same, right? It's if you're not working on that toughness, it falters, and
For
it
sure.
has to be something you work on. Yeah.
Not,
We're
not very many.
the adults, so we get to be in charge, so we get to say that the kids are soft when we're just as likely to be, to be soft.
We're a little bit older, so we get to pass judgment, I guess, right? So it's
Absolutely, right? Absolutely. So I think that there's no doubt. I mean, just you didn't tell me a whole lot about your story, and we don't need to get into too much, but there's no doubt that there had to be childhood trauma there, right? And
For sure.
and it's just there. And I think it's great that you recognize that as a way to help you connect with your athletes.
Yep, and it took some time. When I was young, I probably didn't get it. I was more of a power through, in my 20s. But of course, I was confused myself. And I think as I got
Yeah.
older and I got over to Farmington, part of my job was to work on trauma training and working with people. And then I realized, like, hey, when you take this ACEs test, and I'm not doing very good on this test, that we're giving these kids, and
Yep.
you look at the trauma and those types of things, and you realize, well, of course, that it's normal that this would happen, that I would have felt this way, and then you can kind of figure things out.
Yeah. So where have you coached before? Where'd you coach before Farmington?
So I started out. I was a year at Macomb, and then I went to Knoxville,
Okay.
back to my hometown, which is I was the head coach there, and we got things going for a few years, and then I thought I didn't like it. And I mean, I think a lot of coaches would not tell you this, but and I haven't told very many people this, but I got out of it because I didn't like being criticized by people that I knew really well that were my friends.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's just the truth. And I thought, I don't want
Yeah.
to do this anymore. And I quit coaching completely and thought I was done. And then
Yeah.
I got, the blood gets running again, and you're ready to do it again. And I've got back in it, and I love it now. But I think it was my own maturity that allowed me to be successful, to enjoy my success, I should say.
Your ability to recognize that was probably the issue, and it allows you to come back. I'm sure it makes you nobody likes to be criticized, let's be honest, but that's a natural thing. And if we realize that criticism is sometimes useful, it really helps us out.
Well, I mean, what kind of criticism do we not like? The stuff that's true. I mean, that's the most hurtful stuff, right?
Yeah.
So
it's one of the things I work on with athletes all the time is that really struggle with criticism, because that's what you're doing when you're coaching, right? You're
Sure.
criticizing, and kids, and I just try to teach them that you have to use, and to be fair, coaches don't always deliver criticism in the right way, right?
Right.
And so it's the kids aren't going to take it the right way because it's not delivered in the right way. And the thing I'm always trying to work with them on is you have to learn to take criticism as information, right? Some of it you're going to have to filter out and realize that it's no good, but a lot of it is good. And how can I use that for my benefit? And I mean, that takes maturity, right? And it's a lot to expect for a kid, but we can start to plant the seeds.
And I think part of that with kids, I'm watching. My daughter's 9. One of my daughters is 9, and she's playing travel ball for the first time. And she's played Uptown League like everybody else starts, and she's getting coached hard for the first time. And the first time she came out of there, she said, "I wish she was more about relationships, Dad." I said, "Why don't you tell her that?" No, but then she started to see herself get better. And the last time she got in the car, she said, "I realize now, like, sometimes people just got to tell you stuff or you're not going to get better." And I said, it took me till I was 35. Good job. You're 9.
As a 9-year-old, that's that's wise words from a 9-year-old. You better, but she's probably hearing it from you a little bit. It's some of it's
her mom, but
somebody. Yeah, I know. So you're moving in. So when did you come into Farmington?
I got to Farmington as an assistant principal, I think, in the fall of 2012.
Okay.
Did not coach, was just assistant principal. Then I went back and was an assistant for Casey Martin, great guy, was a coach here. And we had a really successful year that year, really fun. And Farmington had not traditionally had a lot of football success, tons of basketball success, tons of track success.
Yeah.
And he retired after that year, and our numbers were really low. I think the first year I took over, I want to say we finished the season with 38 kids, and we were competitive. We were 5-4. We didn't make the playoffs and didn't deserve to be. And that's when we started talking about, we have this whole population of kids in our school that everybody's complaining about. Well, they should be our kids. Everybody will be happy because the kids will be happier. They got somebody to go to. We'll be happier. We need kids, and the teachers will be happier because they got somebody to come to when they're having these problems. And we made a really concerted effort with our coaches to get these guys out, and it's really took off from there. It's interesting to me, though. The numbers came before the success, and usually the success comes and then the numbers. But the numbers came before the success for us, which is a little bit odd,
I think that that's interesting. You put it that way. And I'm trying to, and I'm racking my brain to try to get, some evidence on one way or the other. And I think that you're probably right, but I would tell you that if you get the numbers before the success, you're golden, man. Right?
Yeah. And our numbers have not wavered. We finished last season with 96 kids.
Wait a minute. So you started with 30, what'd you say, 38?
38 ended the season. Yeah.
You're talking about freshman through senior for did you try to run 3 teams or just 2 there?
We still ran 3 teams, but it was, 2 teams were playing or 1 team was playing both sides, freshmen and sophomores.
Yeah. You got those freshmen that are running ragged playing, several games.
Yeah.
So you got 38. So 38's, I don't know, that's a low number for trying to do 3 teams 11-man
Mm-hmm.
football. But you basically triple your numbers in how short a time?
I want to say, last year was the highest, but we were in the 80s by 2016, by 2015 maybe, and we started. That was 13. We started, so 2 years.
Just a couple years, right? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and how many kids? Like you said, so you're in the right around 90 now. How many kids you got? How many boys do you actually have in the high school?
So we have 350 kids. So we have roughly like 56% of the boys are out for football. So we have 114 signed up this year. So
Yeah.
that's,
114. Okay. So
yeah.
you have, so basically 56% of your boys in the high school play football.
Yep. And we do some things that that help get them out. I think that of course I'd share, but I think we do a really good job of retaining them. And I think that's the thing where most programs it's a little bit different. Like kids come out, I don't play, I'm not good at this, they quit. Our kids have stuck with it, even whether they've played a ton or they haven't. And everybody, I think, when you talk to people, everybody thinks that playing time is the answer. You got to find a place to play them. I think you have to give them what they're looking for, and it's not always playing time. I've got, of those 98 kids that finished the season last year, 25 of them didn't want on the field. I'll just be honest with you. I know they didn't, but they were good kids and they want to be part of something.
Mental Mettle Coaching is driven by a passion for sharing knowledge and experience that will allow athletes and coaches to grow, play, and live in a positive way. We offer a range of coaching and professional development services. First and foremost, we offer individual mental coaching for athletes, and it's easily the most efficient and effective way to help athletes replace fear and anxiety with positivity and confidence. Mental Mettle Coaching has helped middle school setters to high school lacrosse middies to D1 offensive linemen. If you have an athlete that needs to improve their mindset in athletics, mental coaching is the answer. We also offer team coaching, which uses the same concepts as individual mental coaching, but applies them in a group setting. Team bonding outings are great, but they do nothing to address the thoughts and feelings that can derail a team. Team coaching does address that, and it's a great option for helping your team grow. Finally, Mental Mettle Coaching offers social, emotional learning, professional development programs for educators and coaches. There are self-paced online programs, there are virtual coaching options, and even in-person seminars available. This PD will help increase the mental health of your staff and eventually your student athletes and the culture of your school. All of the Mental Mettle coaching programs have the same goal. Our mission is to help athletes and coaches develop a resilient and spirited mindset that will help them confidently face any obstacles or challenges they seek, regardless of their situation. If you would like to see the same in your athlete, your team, and your staff, contact Coach Toman for more information.
They
wanted to be part of something. When you say find what they're looking for, I'm just going to say that seems like a little extra effort on the coaching staff, doesn't it?
I think it's a little bit, but I think it's more about changing how you approach people and just changing how you approach the kids. Like the one thing I learned that was different from my first time coaching, and I think my first time coaching, I was always like, it was set up to make me comfortable and feel better. Let's get to the game really early because I feel better. Now they're all nervous, but man, I feel better that we're here, but that's just a small example, but coaches always do that. It's the way they like to do it. Let's run a zillion plays before the game because that's what I like to do. It makes me feel better. They remember how to do it. But it was always about, we're going to do this because this is the way football is, or this is the way it's always been here. Well, coming to Farmington, I don't want to say they didn't have tradition, but they didn't have a huge amount of tradition. It wasn't a group of, meatheads standing on the fence yelling at me, telling me it's got to be that way. They really just trusted me to do what I thought was the right way to go about it. And the first thing we did was we trauma trained all our coaches. And I think when they all realized, and I had a really great group, that first group of coaches had never coached for anybody but me. And they just bought into it. And they realized, like when we talked about the trauma training, the main thing that we got from it was save the relationship. There's going to be consequences. There's going to be discipline. There's going to be playing time. There's going to be benchings. Save the relationship with the kids. And I think that's one thing that since I've been here has always stood out. And not just with me, my assistant coaches do an awesome job. They've bought into it. And you got to have the right kind of guys. You know, if you think you're hiring a coach, anybody that's listening to this thinks they're going to hire a coach because he knows the X's and O's and knows all this, those don't matter that much. I mean, get the right kind of guys on board with you and you'll be fine.
I'm amazed at that decision that you said the first thing we wanted to do was trauma train the coaches. I want to, tell me more about that training. Where'd you get it from? And I'm very interested in this idea because it's clearly working for you.
So a lady named Carly Jones, and she's a psych, has been in our district, or social worker in our district, but she's trauma certified. And I was working with her as director of student services to trauma train some teachers. And the main thing was we wanted our teachers to be able to understand that population's growing as it is everywhere. And our superintendent, we have a new not I shouldn't say new, he's been there 8 years now, but when he came in, he's really on top of things, really ahead of the curve on those types of things, on services for kids.
Yeah.
And I went through that training and it just hit home with me. Like this all makes sense. You know, we've got to save the relationship with these kids. If we do that, they're going to have a place to turn to and you know, it's going to help us. And all the coaches that I had bought in. And that was the amazing part for me. You know, usually you've got the coaches that'll
that was good. You know what, Coach? That was going to be my next question. My next question was what was the response? So they all bought into it?
Immediately all bought into it. And I think because they did, you could train those guys, but if they don't do it, it doesn't matter, right?
It wasn't. Well, we could talk about anything. We could talk about. I could try. You know, I could try to train you how to use a fire extinguisher. But if you're not paying attention, you don't care. When the fire shows up, you're going to be like, I really wasn't paying attention. So I mean, yeah, it doesn't matter what we're talking about. If they don't, they had to buy in, right? Or it wouldn't have worked.
And the one thing I will say, like everybody will say, well, who's the most important coach in your staff? And you'll hear people say, the guy that runs the weight room or the old line coach. The most important coach on our staff is the freshman coach, because for us, he teaches elementary school. He's a hero because he's a male teacher down there at the elementary school running around, right? I always tell him you're a little bit taller and a little bit wittier than those guys, so they like you. You know, you're like the most popular kid in the elementary, but he has such great relationships with him. He'll go and eat lunch with the 8th graders, talk to them, and he had a kid that had a terrible home life, and this is no lie. He told him to. Something you should never say to somebody. He didn't yell at him. He continued to coach. After practice, he came over to me and said, this is what he said. I told him to go over there and cool off. The kid went home. He came back in and there was discipline for the kid. We suspended him. The kid felt bad. That's the kind of stuff the kid dealt with at home. He's 14. Is there something wrong with him? Yeah, there's something wrong with every 14-year-old, right? So the kid, we worked out a contract with the kid where he was going to come and practice his tail off. He'd been poor grades off and on. I said, you got to be passing every class. You got to be at every practice. If you are, we'll let you back on for the last game. So for 7 weeks, the kid did it, and he finished the season. The coach didn't scream at him, didn't yell at him. He just talked to him, listened to the kid apologize, and he said, okay, let's move on. We punished him. Because there's still consequences with it, but
yes,
the only reason he would have yelled at him is because it made him feel better, right?
Yeah,
it's not
absolutely.
Our feelings are no more important. My feelings are no more important than everybody else's, you know? And
I think
that's what we got to remember.
Yeah. I think that you have to also think about it from that kid's perspective. And I don't know, I can assume he didn't have a great home life. And it's probably the first time he's done something like that and gotten a calm response, right? And had somebody treat him in a calm, respectful manner. And I mean, you could have just, like, if your coach should have just yelled back at him, it's just gas on the fire, right? You're surely not teaching that kid something he needs to know, right? Because he already knows that trick, right?
Yep. And I don't know if we handled it right, if we handled it soft, but I do know that his best friend on the team walked over, put his arm around him, walked him over and sat him down by the tree and said, "You can't talk like that to coach. Sit down."
Yeah.
Like, they handled it. And, obviously there's repercussions later. And, his parents came in, they understood he'd done wrong. They were, and they just said, "Please don't throw him out." And I called my coach and I said, "I know I should kick him off, but what do you think about this?" And he said, "Let's save the kid. Let's do what we can do." And the kid was never a player for us. He wasn't a player then, but he ended up graduating, and he was out for football and he graduated. And that's what we're here for,
I mean, so he continued to play football for you?
Yeah, he played football. He was never, when I say a player, I meant he wasn't a starter or anything like that for us. He was a player. Yeah.
That's a moot point, though.
Sure.
I mean, when you say I'm not sure we did it right, I mean, he kept coming. He graduated. Mm-hmm. He finished for you. I mean, what else do you want?
Well, you hear from other coaches and they'll say, "Well, you got to kick him off or everybody else will do that." Our kids knew he was wrong. They all knew he was wrong. I mean, what do you need me to do to him? They all knew he was wrong, So
yeah.
They didn't want to be like that.
And I think that is more about the coach saying, "You can't talk. I'm not going to let somebody talk to me like that." And that's an ego-driven thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
I like to let a kid talk to you like that and not have this loud, boisterous response. That's an ego thing, and that'll get you in trouble.
But our freshman coach, he didn't even tell me about it until after our practice were all the way done. I said, "Why didn't you come get me?" And he said, "Well, I didn't need you." He's like, his buddies had handled it, and I knew you'd take care of it. We'll just talk about it after practice,
Yeah.
So,
it helped me a little bit. It's funny when you were talking about him walking around the grade school. I was a administrator at a grade school for a couple of years, and if I was ever having a bad day, I just walk. I mean, I'm 6'4", big guy, and I was like, every time I walk down the hallway, I was like a superhero, right? And I'm like, and I feel really good. But my point is I would run into some kids that were, first grade, something like that were clearly undergoing trauma at home every day. And they would, kids like that are, first grade, dropping the F-bomb on me and wanting to do this and stuff like that. And when you see it in such a young kid, I think it's easier for you to understand, well, this is very learned behavior, right? Why would I get so mad at this little kid? He's clearly learning it at home, and I have to try to be calm on this. But I think that if you're coaching high school and you just see this in a 15-year-old, you think, "Oh, well, that's developed and it's a choice." But no, it's probably something that they learned at home and nobody's just dealt with, or it's just built up. But it's I think you have to find a different way to deal with it.
For sure. And I mean, to say we've never removed a kid from the team would not be true. We have had a kid or two, and we just came to the realization, you got to meet us halfway. This is not going to work. And they couldn't, and we had to move on. So, but we try not to ever do that. But I will tell you this, no matter what a kid does, I always tell them, "I hope I see you out here next year," because kids grow and they change, and everybody's welcome to come back out the next year, no matter what. So,
well, we're not talking about doing everything perfect and doing it right, and you just be, you can trauma certify all your coaches, but that doesn't mean that somebody doesn't cross a line, and you got to think what's best for the team. There's nobody's perfect, and I get that, but I think that the fact that you're looking at it from a different mindset is fantastic. And I also think that, you mentioned that, there's more and more of these kids that come in with some trauma issues. I agree. But I don't think that, one, I think it's more than people think. And two, you could have a kid that comes in with no trauma issues whatsoever, but being trauma certified and understanding some of those things, it still helps you with that kid.
For sure. I mean, I think it helps you with people. Like all these kids that we're talking about are 17, 18. Well, guess what? They end up being 22, 23. We work with them. We raise our kids with them. It's better to understand people. You've got to understand different types of people. So I think there's nothing. You want to keep growing and learning.
Yeah, I agree. So you do the trauma certified, but you're also talking about the retention. What else are you doing to retain the kids beyond just the trauma certified training?
So every year we have a little retreat, and we used to go to these clinics and try to learn stuff from people. And what we realized is you're getting tidbits of this and that. And we still do some of that, but now so much of it's online.
Yeah.
You order it and watch it on your own. So we do a retreat where we rent an Airbnb. All the coaches come together and we talk about tons of offense, defense, that stuff. But we take every kid and we assign them all a coach that checks in with them. And it's not a formal check in, check the box, but we all keep a sheet and we make sure that we know what's going on in those kids' lives. And there are some kids, everybody's going to get 8 or 10 kids that you just know they're fine, but
Yeah.
somebody else, hey, this kid was in the play last year and he's not doing it. Now he just quit the track team. Let's figure out what's going on with this kid. And, you'll send a message. We use GroupMe, the GroupMe app a lot, and check in with them that way. But we want them to make sure that when they get asked the question, hey, who's an adult who you trust? They answer our name. That's when you've done okay, So
Yeah.
we really do that. So we have a social emotional list and everybody checks in with every kid. And I think that's the biggest thing that keeps them. But the other thing we do on Thursdays is we do a normal walkthrough Thursday. And then we come inside and we'll have some sort of theme for the week, football related theme. But then we'll pick 3 different awards. One of my assistants usually picks out something, sometimes it's who's the guy that has never quit, who's the scout player that's improved the most. And anybody can nominate anybody. It's all the players lead it. And they'll stand them up and they'll talk about why they nominate them, what they've seen from them. There is nothing as powerful as your teammates recognizing you. It doesn't matter what I say. It doesn't matter. But those guys have no reason to motivate each other. They're in competition with each other. But you can just see, and then we'll pick one, or we'll pick 3 for the day that get an award and whatever. But the award doesn't matter.
No,
So,
you took the words out of my mouth. Who wins does not matter at all.
So it's funny. We started doing that in 15, and then I think it got big in 16. Our numbers started going up. 17, they were huge. 18, they just kept getting bigger. And then in 2020, it was spring, and that was COVID.
Yeah.
So we're rushed, and I said we're not going to do our Thursday night stuff. We're just going to practice, get out of here. We only get to play 4 games that year, or 6 games, whatever you got. We got 4, and we said we're not going to come inside because that's just another chance to get dinged and win with these guys to get games. Yep. So we didn't do it. I have not had a parent meeting. I had a parent meeting in like 2000, maybe 14, and we ended up being really good friends by the end of it. By the end of the thing. He thought my AD was a jerk because he took the bullet, but we ended up being really good friends. And then in 2020, we started having like 2 or 3 parents complaining about different things. And I thought, what the heck's happened? And then we realized those kids weren't getting what they needed. Like they were complaining about playing time. Yep. We never hear that. But what are you going to, if playing time is the only thing you can get, then of course you're going to complain when you're not getting a piece of the pie. But if you're getting noticed by your teammates, you're getting confidence, then when your parents get mad, you start to say, Mom, look, I love how this is going, and the kids are your biggest allies at that point. And so we got back on it and we haven't heard a word since.
Hopefully what you noticed is, and I think I'm right with this, hopefully what you learned was 2020 was probably the year you needed it the most.
Oh, for sure. For sure it was. I mean, you had so many kids just, probably the most painful social emotional thing we had that year is, they lost in Illinois, they lost the whole fall. Nobody could do anything. Yeah. And then they jammed all the sports in the spring, which I'm not blaming. It's just what it was. And
I know.
We played a game against a big rival of ours. We beat them on a 4th down, stopped them right at the end. It was kind of an upset. Our kids are flying high. And then the health department calls and said somebody has COVID. The whole program shut down. So for their eyes, they looked alive for the first time in a year. And then we took it from them. And then not only we take it from them, we said, hey, you guys are all hurting. We're taking away the most important thing in your life. Now go home and make sure you're alone. It was heartbreaking. When I think about the worst thing, it wasn't a loss. It was that,
I don't want to get political and I don't want to act like we didn't know what to do. A lot of people making decisions based on less than all of the information, but I have no problem saying that we did more social emotional damage to kids with shutting things down than they ever would have faced with the sickness. And
For
I know
sure.
there's other stories, and I'm not getting into that, but I think that
That's just a fact.
we're going to be digging out of that hole for a while. I really feel like it, and there's going to be some serious issues with it. And luckily, Coach, with your boys, they've got the next year coming back, and you guys are trauma trained. You're doing these recognition pieces. You are doing these retention things and making them feel wanted, making them feel wanted and needed, and things like that. So your kids are probably bouncing back more than a lot of other programs, but I think that's part of the message I want to get out here, that this stuff it matters and it's useful.
You can't make chicken salad out of chicken feathers, or perhaps you've heard it or even said the other version. Regardless, good coaches should not blame a lack of success on the players they get to coach. It's a lame excuse, and I'm sorry if that ruffles your feathers. But it's your job as a coach to develop your players. If your athletes lack skill or mental toughness, it's your responsibility to develop it. But how do you make today's athlete tougher without risking breaking them? Well, Mental Mettle Coaching now offers professional development for coaches, explaining how to do just that. The program is called Ember to Inferno, Building Mentally Tough Athletes. It teaches real tools and tangible methods that are proven to increase the mental health and toughness of athletes. The program is available as an in-person seminar or as virtual small group coaching. Don't wish for mentally tough athletes. Build them. Contact Mental Mettle Coaching today. No amount of athletic talent or physical ability can overcome a poor mindset. Anxiety, fear, and negativity will always diminish an athlete's abilities and limit their success. If you're not intentionally developing your child's mental toughness, then they are not reaching their full potential. Mental Mettle Coaching provides the individual drills needed to build the positive mindset necessary for success on the court and in life. Contact today to schedule a free coaching session and start building mental toughness in your athlete.
Oh, for sure. I mean, it's helped me too. What I've realized is, like, before I would have been, if a good player was telling me he's not going to go out, I would have been, you got to go out. I just stressed about it. Well, I just said, hey, good luck. We love having you in the program. I hope you change your mind. And what I've realized is 9 times out of 10, they change their mind and they come back, and I just refuse to worry about that kind of stuff now. And I just let it take care of itself.
Yeah, it's controlling what you can, and yeah, I just think that, yeah, I love that recognition piece. I think and what's interesting, when I said about you, it was the year that you probably needed it more than you think than 2020. You figured out the things that you thought you had to keep, and the things that you said, okay, we're going to keep these things and we're going to cut these things, and you probably default back to some of the basic, well, we got to do these drills and we got to do this X's and O's and stuff like this because that's what we think is the most important. But even you said early, it's not the most important.
If I did it again, we'd learn all the safe stuff, block and tackle safely. We'd say, we're running the same plays as last year. Remember these? We'd call them the same thing, and we'd just go run generic plays. You know what? The outcome would be the same. But we would still find a time to do that instead of the specific playing. We'd find time for the recognition.
Yeah, I don't know how to reconcile the idea of, I don't want to say X's and O's don't matter, because they really, really do. I mean, I had Coach Derek Lennon on here, and that dude, like, X's and O's, but he gets his guys to buy into it. There's more than just the X's and O's with him, but he's an X and O genius. But it's just not everything. And I think that it's more important that the kids feel recognized and loved and wanted than it's more important for that than it is for them to know where they exactly need to be in every play.
I mean, Coley Welter, who coaches at Monticello, he's the only head coach to win state championships at 2 different public schools. And then you got Derek Leonard, who's won, I quit counting after 10 state championships, right?
Yeah.
Those 2 guys are fantastic at X's and O's, and they do their kids feel loved,
Yeah.
No matter how many X's and O's and who I hire, unless I hire one of those 2, I'm not catching those 2 anyway. So I may as well spend my time doing something else. That's the way I see it anyway. So
yeah,
the X's and O's definitely matter, but you can chase your tail forever on that stuff.
Absolutely. And I think that the next question I'm going to have for you, we're talking about getting good numbers. We're talking about retention. We're talking about making the kids feel loved and saving the relationships. We have not yet talked about wins and losses, right? And
Right.
and I contend that probably shouldn't be the first thing you're worried about. But I'm curious, how's the program doing from that perspective lately?
We've done pretty well. I mean, I think we've won every conference championship since 16 except for one. And we've won undefeated 3 times in the regular season. We've been to the quarters 3 times since that amount of time. So we've won our fair share too, which is great. But we have a huge advantage because of the number of kids we have out. I mean, that's, not the number of kids we have in the school, but they all play. So
yeah. Well, you still only get 11 at a time on the field,
sure.
Coach, right?
Yeah, sure.
I mean, I really hadn't followed your program enough to know what your record was, but I felt really confident you're doing those things. It turns into success. It just does. And I don't know what the formula for winning is, but I know that it's not just focusing on winning.
Yeah, and I think if you do that, you could feel pretty empty. I think back to my first job, and I told you that I didn't like being criticized, but I think part of me growing up, I started to judge myself on how I did in football. But football, whether you win or lose has nothing to do with who you are as a person. And I think, being a dad and doing all those things and figured myself out more than anything made me realize, like, Toby Vallas, the coach, whatever, win, lose, it doesn't matter. It doesn't have any bearing on the kind of person I am and those types of things and the kind of values I have. So I think but I think there's a lot of young coaches that you see, like, they're not doing well, and young and old, that are just depressed when they lose. That's nothing to be depressed about.
Yeah.
Cancer is something to be depressed about. That's not, I mean, death in the family is something to be depressed about. Losing a football game, it's somebody, half of you guys lost, half of us lost that week.
It's hard. We get and athletes do the same thing. We get our identity tied into our success and our wins and losses, and it's a hard it's a hard line because it's a competitive game and you want to win and you're supposed to win and you do everything you can to win, but then you have to be okay with the fact that you don't win, and that's a hard it's a hard line to draw for a lot of people.
I still have trouble with it. I do. I can tell you that it's not like it used to be, but to say after we lose that I'm not, ask my wife, it's a bad Saturday and Sunday, but the sun comes up, and I think when I was young, I let that really, you have a bad season, I let that really make me think I'm no good, and that was just not the truth.
Yeah. And the things I would tell coaches is let's say you have a group of players that give everything they have to you and work really hard and do everything you ask, and they end up going 500, right? Like, just because you don't immediately look at those kids and be like, those kids, I just don't like those kids, right? Like, I just don't care for those kids. They're not good people. No, it's the opposite. You're like, right. And I feel like that we don't give ourselves, as coaches, we don't give ourselves that same grace, right? Hey, I'm doing everything I can, right? It doesn't mean I'm a bad person, right? I'm putting everything I can into it. It's just not getting the wins.
When I played in high school, we had traditionally been really strong. Our high school had been, and my class was the terrible class. And we came through, and well, looking back now, I know what my coaches were feeling like, especially my head coach. He was a great guy, great coach, but he took it personal, and he took it. The truth was, we just weren't very talented. I mean, that's the truth. We just weren't very good. And he could have brought, Bill Belichick in, and we were still going to hope to win 2 or 3 games,
Yeah.
So, but
hey, the coach, I think the coach of the year always goes to somebody who wins a lot of games, and it usually should be given to somebody who goes about 500 and gets the most out of a bunch of kids, right?
For sure.
Yeah. So anything we missed on, like, getting these kids out and you're talking about keeping them, getting them out, retaining them, stuff like that. Other than them just coming out, like, what do you see as the result? Are you able to track and figure out how is their mental health? How is their mental toughness? Do you see?
So we do and actually our AD has adopted it. We have a social emotional survey that we give in the middle of the season, and they can comment on it, do whatever, and it lets you know how you're doing. Like, I feel like I can talk to my coach about this. I feel like my coach has favorite. There's a lot of different things on there, but it lets us kind of see it. And then I like to get it in football. I like to get it about like week 3, because I know it's early, but you have that preseason stuff. You've been with them all summer.
Yeah.
And it gives you time to kind of correct those things or kind of talk about, you don't get their names, but it gives you time to work toward fixing those things. And then we take it again at the end of the year. And I think it's been good for all our coaches. I think it's eye-opening for all of our coaches, because I think you get caught coaching a season and you're not as self-aware as you think you are, because you're so focused on your team. And I think that's something that a lot of coaches, all of us, struggle with at times when we get really into something. But that kind of pulls you back in. The other thing that we do, we all work out together. So we don't in June, we don't do any football. And in July, they don't do any basketball. And then they play baseball at night, but we all use the mornings. But we all lift together every day, every sport. And you'd be surprised how many kids say, you know what, I'm going to play football. I've been here lifting with these guys anyway, or I'm going to play basketball because I'm here. And the one thing I think our school has going, people say in our conference, well, you got this. We don't fight over kids. All of our best kids do everything. The basketball coach, the old basketball coach is a friend of mine, and he'd walk a kid in and say, I love this kid, but he's yours again. If he wasn't helping them at all, but he was a good football player. So, but I think that's one thing, like, there's just that camaraderie among especially our male athletes.
Yeah. I think that I do. I think that if we're being, coaches are trying to take and hog players, and not, like, you're not doing what's best for the kid, right? You're doing what's best for the coach and what you want. And it's not what we're there for. It's not what coaches are there for. You're there for the kid, and you got to do what's best for the kid. And if that means he doesn't play your sport, or he plays multiple sports and it makes your team not as good, which I don't even know that's the case, it's worth it, right?
Yeah, and you don't want the kid to sit around in 8 or 10 years and think he did what was best for him and not for me. That's the worst thing you want as a coach.
Yeah. And they probably figure that, they don't need 10 years to figure that out. They notice that. They notice that.
For sure.
Coach, this has been a phenomenal conversation. What have we missed, right? Like, we've been really talking about this mental health, and I just love you guys. I mean, when you talk about this, leaning into this social emotional stuff, it's not lip service with you at your program. It is. I feel like it's not like you just say, oh, we need to make this a priority. I think that it feels to me like you like this is part of your success.
Yeah, the credit goes to the coaching staff, because we genuinely have all guys that love those kids. Across the street, my freshman coach lives, and he's a young guy. He had not ever coached line, hadn't done any of that, but he's our line coach now. He'd worked his tail off. First thing he started doing was, hey, Saturdays, him and his wife were having linemen over. They were going to walk and talk and do whatever, but he was going to grill out with them all last summer. So they'd come over for cookouts and things like that all the time. And it ended up no football talk, just goofing around, but the kids loved it and look forward to it. And he's been successful because of that. They'll do whatever he asks them to do. So I think that buying in is the biggest part.
Yeah. I just love the idea that you're focusing on the social emotional part, and that you see it as part of your success and you're having success, right? I think that too many coaches, too many places, too many districts see the social emotional stuff as something else we have to do, right? And it's a piece, and it's a leverage point for you.
Yeah, it's a difference maker. Everybody says we don't have enough counselors, we don't have enough social workers. It's all true. Who do you go to when the kids are having a problem? You go talk to their coaches. So as coaches, I think
to their coaches.
I think instead of saying it's not my problem, I think we got to help those kids figure out what their problems are. And I don't want to tell you like we're solving all these problems for these kids, because every day there's something, but
Yeah.
they know who to turn to, and they're always going to have that relationship no matter what it is. So
Yeah. No, it's awesome. Last question here, Coach. What did I not ask you that I should have?
man, I don't know. I think we talked about most of it. I don't know if there's anything else left. So
Okay. I love it. This has been a phenomenal interview. It just speaks it speaks to my heart and just what I'm trying to do so much. I think that we recognize that kids are in a tough spot right now, and I think coaches more than any other adult have the opportunity to make a difference in that, and I just want more coaches to see that. And plus, I can hear in your voice and talking to you that it gives you energy and it helps your own mental health, helping them.
well, it makes your job purposeful. You know,
Yeah.
if your purpose is to win games, and trust me, I want to win. I'm as competitive as anybody.
I know.
I get fiery, but at the end, the purpose is going to help these kids. Are these kids getting graduated? Are they going to be better fathers, better husbands than they would have before? That's what you want to do, and you want to win the games
Yeah.
along the way too, because you want them to have a great experience with you.
Yeah. I can't thank you enough for coming on, Coach. It's been a great conversation, and good luck to you in your endeavors. Good luck over the summer, and good luck to Farmington football next season.
All right. I appreciate you having me. Thank you.
You bet, Coach.
Mettle is a person's ability to face adversity in a spirited and resilient manner. It is a great skill to have for athletics and for life, but it is not something we are born with. If you want it, you have to forge your mettle. And if you listen to the Mental Mettle Podcast, you already know that, but not everybody else does yet. So help me out by ordering and wearing some sweet The Mental Mettle Podcast gear. We've got short sleeve tees, long sleeve tees, and some super comfortable hoodies. Order online today and you can have your gear in no time. But the best part is that every order helps support the show and helps me spread the message that mental toughness is a trait that can and should be built. So find the link in the show notes, order your gear, and start showing that you know how to forge your mettle. Parents of athletes know that confidence and belief are fundamental for success. We want them to play without fear and without anxiety, but once those negative thoughts take over, it can derail years of work. Turning that anxiety into belief is similar to building strength and speed. It just takes intentional effort over time. Mental Mettle Coaching provides the individual drills needed to build the positive mindset necessary for success on the court and in life. Contact today to schedule a free coaching session and start building mental toughness in your athlete.
My hope is that interview in this episode opens your eyes a little bit if you're a coach. It opens your eyes up a little bit on how important SEL or social emotional learning is for you, for your program, for your athletes, all of that. It is, I think that there's been a push on social emotional learning and a lot of focus on mental health. And I think that's good, but it's come with a little bit of resistance at times. And I think that this episode is a great example on how you need to understand that as a coach, as a coaching staff, a focus on social emotional learning is not a hindrance. It's a benefit. It is not a time waster. It is a time saver. It is not something that makes your job harder. It's something that makes your job easier. And also, it's the right thing to do. It's the right thing to do for your athletes. It's the right thing to do for your families. It's the right thing to do for your community. It's the right thing to do for you. Because the more you learn about this stuff, the more you learn about yourself and the more you can help yourself and others. And as we talked to Coach Vallas there, it appears as though it's the right thing to do for your program, right? Like he's not just doing it, he's seeing a lot of success with it. So have it be the most selfish thing you can imagine. Like I want
if I want to win more games and I want to win some conference championships and have some undefeated seasons, maybe I ought to look into focusing on social emotional learning for my athletes, because it's going to be something that helps, rather than getting off the mindset that it is something that's a hindrance. And I broke down some of the things from that interview that I think, as a checklist, that I think that you should do. Number one is the first thing he did when he took over. He said, get his coaches trauma trained. Well, what's that mean? And they're not getting some sort of certification. What he means is they're becoming aware of it. They're trauma informed. So they got a therapist. You can get a therapist. You can get a psychiatrist. You can get a psychologist. You can get a certified coach like me that's trauma informed, because that's in part of the training that I did. You had to learn about trauma and how it affects and how to move forward from it. And I think that if you've done nothing with your coaches, anything that you do, anybody that's coming in on how trauma affects the youth, their mindset, their health, and how it triggers different emotions. And I know that's a word that people get upset about, and they're like, "Oh, everybody gets triggered these days," but it's real, right? We're not talking. We don't need you to get. We don't want to placate and just allow people to get triggered at the smallest things. But we're talking about, your coaches need to understand that if you get up in a kid's face and they push back, you might easily be triggering something that they get at home, that their response is to either shut down or to fight back, and you're just leaning into it, right? So if you're not aware of that, and you don't understand how that affects them and how it affects their mentality, then you're making it worse. And I think that you're going to get a little resistance anytime you say, hey, we want to get trauma informed or trauma trained. But I think that if you've got a group of coaches that love to complain about how soft kids are, they're the perfect example of coaches that need to get a little bit of education, because it is, as we mentioned in the episode, it's a bit of an ego thing, and it's a complaint. Quite honestly, it's a complaint. We want to complain about the things that are bad. Oh, kids are soft. They can't do this. And here's the problem, whatever. But you're not doing anything about it. And it's not necessarily soft. And a lot of the things that the kids are doing are the same things we would do in those situations. So learning how we respond to stress, anxiety, or stress, to adversity, and to these triggers and different things that are going on in our life, you're putting kids in adverse situations. That's what sports are and practices are. Why wouldn't you want to understand how it affects kids and how you can help them through it, right? It's one of the things I say in the beginning of the start of the show. A coach's job should be to help kids overcome adversity and not be more the adversity. And that's, I think, being trauma informed is one way to do that. Another second thing is when he talked about creating time for recognition, and they do it once a week where they put people up for awards and they nominate, and then coaches and players can say good things about their teammates. That's huge. If you are recognizing and helping kids feel valued and helping them feel appreciated, it's huge. Dave Feeney, he's a basketball coach at Normal Community. He was on, and he talked about how they do that with his girls. And I've had other coaches talk about that. And what's interesting, and here's why I think it's going to help your job easier, as he mentioned there, the more you do that, the less parent complaints you get. And it makes sense. If the only thing that a kid thinks matters is playtime, then you're always going to have kids that are upset because they're not getting to play. You always have kids that aren't going to play. But if they're coming home from practices and they're like, hey, I got an award today, or I had one of my teammates let me know that they appreciated me and I feel valued and I have a purpose on this team and there's a reason I'm here and doing it. We are no different as adults when think about the times that you get upset with your job. It's because you're not being appreciated.
You're not being valued. And anytime that somebody, a colleague or a boss or somebody goes out of their way to let you feel appreciated and let them know and recognizing you, it does a lot for us, right? Why wouldn't you want to create that sort of situation in your team? It's just going to help everything. And not to even mention, you're not just doing it to not have parent complaints. You have athletes that now feel better about themselves and get out there on the field and work hard for each other. That's what we're after, right? And also what helps him keep him coming back. His numbers are awesome. How he's having the guys, more and more kids wanting to be on the team, and over 50% of the boys in the high school play football. That's amazing, especially in a time when a lot of schools that Farmington size are struggling with football numbers, right? If that's you and you're struggling with these football numbers, start thinking about some of these things. You want to create a place where kids feel valued and where they want to be and where they feel heard. And that's phenomenal. Another thing he said, the third thing, they talk about doing different check-ins, and they do that a couple ways. They have a social emotional survey that they do. And then they also have each kid is on a coach's list that they're going to be checking in. And so they're monitoring the mental health of these kids. I had a podcast with Josh Jostis of Moreau Forsyth. You can go and listen to that. He does the same thing. Another highly successful coach is doing the same thing, doing little surveys, social emotional check-ins, seeing how kids are. And that is, it helps the coaches understand where their players are and what they need to be working on from an emotional standpoint. But also, as he mentioned, they want each kid to know that there's an adult that they can go to if they need help. And they want to be that person for that kid, and they want everybody to know that, right? Again, so you're creating a situation where kids are feeling recognized, appreciated, and where they're feeling safe that they can have somebody to go talk to. Those are phenomenal feelings. Think about your life and how when you are in those situations, how good that feels to you. And the last one, I noticed that I think as a staff, you need to develop a mindset around this stuff and a mental mindset around the program, about the athletes. And he said, and they had a phrase, they say, save the relationship. And most teams have some sort of an idea on, they have a phrase for their staff on what we're trying to do. And, a lot of it is physical or something to do with the sport itself. And this one I thought was phenomenal because he said, as a staff, our idea is save the relationship. They're thinking of that first, right? It's not, oh, this kid, what can he do for me? What can we do for the team? It's not, how is he, being a cancer? How's he, affecting me? How's he disrespecting me? And what's he doing? It's thinking first. The goal is save the relationship, all right? As he mentioned, there's problems with that, and it doesn't always work like you want. But I think having that be in their mindset is huge. And it's clear that it helps because he's getting kids come play. And with that, he's seeing success, like traditional success, like a lot of wins and a really good program. So that's the four things that I picked up from it. Get your coaches trauma trained, or at least aware, trauma informed. Build some time with your program to create recognition and appreciation. Have a way that you're checking in with all your kids, like regularly. Have it be an adult's responsibility to check in with a kid, and create a mental mindset. Create a mantra on how you want to be, what you want to be for these kids, and have it be from a mental standpoint and a SEL standpoint, and have that. I think you are going to find out that this sort of focus is not a hindrance. It is not a time waster. It is not woo-woo. It's not a pain. It is something that's extremely helpful for everyone, extremely helpful for your program, extremely helpful for your record, quite honestly. So great episode. It's just, can't say enough. That one I really enjoyed that episode. So I hope you did too. As always, like, share. If you know what I mean, this would be a great episode to be sharing with people. Let them know. Try it out. And if you try any of this and you start working on it, let me know. I'd love to hear I'd love to hear some success stories as a coach. You hear this and you're like, I'm going to try some stuff. Get a hold of me. I'd love to hear about it. So thanks for listening. Thanks for sharing all those things. Thanks for being part of the show. Once again, I am Coach Tolman. This has been the Mental Mettle Podcast. And always remember to forge your metal.
Thanks again for listening to the Mental Mettle Podcast, produced by Coraggio Media, sponsored by QuickCut, a video management platform for every level of play, and by Mental Mettle Coaching, helping athletes learn to face adversity in a spirited and resilient way. The Mental Mettle Podcast is created each week to help players develop more mental toughness, and that is something that will help all of us. So help me out and like and share the Mental Mettle Podcast with your friends. Until next time, keep forging your metal.